So the lesson today is about rounding or estimating to the nearest 10. So we have the number 43 here. One thing I maybe didn't talk about it enough in the last video was that when you know where you're going to round, you should underline that place value. So we know we round around to the nearest 10. So we underline the tens spot. And we look at the one just below it. And this is something to stress. Look at the one just below it because that's the one that's going to tell you how to round. So the book doesn't tell you to do this, but I like to even do the arrow. The book tells you for sure to underline. I like to add in the arrow. And once again, just like the past ones, because we're doing the tens, then you want to write out the 10 above and the 10 below. So the 10 above 43 is 50. The 10 below 43 is 40. And so now we want to figure out, do I go up or down? So we draw these out. 40, oh my goodness, that's not it. Okay, so 40 would be 4 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4. 50 would be 5 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And 43 would be 1, 2, 3, 4 with 3 dots. Now we ask ourselves what's halfway between 40 and 50, and halfway between 40 and 50 would be 45, which is 1, 2, 3, 4 with 5 dots. And so we tell ourselves this is halfway. If you ever get to halfway, you should round up. If you don't get to halfway, you need to round down. So 43, the 4 is fine. We're looking at the one after that, the below, just below the tens is the ones. And if I don't have 5 of these, then I need to go down. I have 1, 2, 3. So that means I don't have 5. I need to round down to 40. So my estimation would be 40. Okay, let's look at another one. Here, I'm rounding to the tens, even though I have something in the hundreds. So once again, I'm going to underline the one I care about, and this is the number I'm going to look at. Now, the 10 above 270 is 280, and this might be kind of confusing because they got used to hundreds, and so I'd go up to 300, but I don't care about the hundreds right now. I'm only caring about the tens. And then I go to the 10 below, which is 270. And then we draw our pictures, so 200, and I have to get 7 lines, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then I don't have any dots. And then for the 280, I've got 2 boxes, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines. And then for 276, I've got 2 boxes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then for my dots, I've got 5, 6 dots. And once again, we're rounding in the tens, so we're not looking at that, we're looking at below it. And so below it I have 6 dots. Now halfway between 270 and 280 is 275, which is 2 boxes. I ran out of room. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then that would be 5 dots. So if I get up to here, then I round up. If I'm below that, if I don't have 5 dots, I'm going to round down. So again, I'm focusing on the dots. Do I have 5 dots or more, or do I have less? And so if I look at the dots, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've got more than 5 dots. So that means I need to round up to 280. So 280 is my estimate. Okay, so once again, we're really stressing that we underline the one we want to round and we look at the one below it. We also want to look at the fact that if I'm rounding to the tens, after it should be a 0. Always. If I'm rounding to the tens, after it should be a 0. Now we want to be careful because what if we had the number 299? If I'm rounding the tens, I've got 9 there. And so, my 100 or my 10 above it is 300, my 10 below it is 290. I'm going to end up rounding up. And so if you notice, I've got my tens here, which also happens to be a 0. So it's not always going to be that there's just one 0 behind it. That number might be a 0 too. And so these are things that can kind of be confusing, which is why when we write it with the 10 above and the 10 below, it gives them more of a visual of why it's 300 and why we're changing this number and not just that number. And so, what we do can actually be very helpful, especially with our pictures and writing above and below. So try this as an option to help your child understand how to do that. Okay, next talk on that is estimating amounts or quantities. And so, in class, they probably used a jar of things and try to estimate how many are in there based on another jar that had a smaller amount, a certain amount. Another thing we can do is we can look at, if you have a picture like this, you can figure out how much space do I have 10 dots in. So let's see here. If I'm looking here, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We'll go 10 there. So if I think did that have 10? Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so I have 10 in this amount of space. So if I visually just take and try and break it up into that amount of space every time, I can estimate how many are in here. Okay, so I'm not doing a perfect job. I'm just trying to estimate and get a visual. So if I look at this, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's say that's 9. So I've got about 90 dots on this page. I don't actually know. I didn't count them. But in my estimation, I'm going to estimate 90. Okay, and maybe instead of, you can count 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. Or maybe I just want to count that as half of one, so I say 85. But that's how you can estimate visually, is by just breaking it down to a known amount and then counting how many of those spaces you have. We can also look at, if I have to estimate the length of this, I estimate this to be about an inch. So then I figure out how many of those do I have about. I'm not being perfect. I'm not worried about that. So now, I don't know, let's say we get another one in there. So now we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I would estimate that to be about 6 inches, which may be off a little bit, but it's an estimate. So if someone asked me if that was 10 inches, I would say, nah, I think that's a little bit too much. And that's what an estimate is about. Another method of estimating when you're adding, so we've talked about that before, and you just estimate each number and round it to the tens or whatever they tell you to estimate. That's used to a lot. We also have something called front-end estimation. So basically we're saying, okay, if I look at all my numbers, the biggest place value is the hundreds. And so that's the only place value I'm going to care about. So your student was actually told to take and put their hand over this part. So if you imagine their hand sitting here, I think I have enough fingers there. So their hand is actually covering up this part of it, and you're only going to add what they can see in the hundreds place. So 4 plus 4 plus 1 is 500. So we would estimate this to be about 500. Now you notice this number 43 was ignored because 43 doesn't have a number in the hundred spot. And so that's just how front-end estimation works. That's okay. And so on their homework, they may see this. I don't know, or it might just be something to do in class. But just in case you see it, that's what front-end estimation is that you cover up everything but the biggest place value, which here's the hundreds, and you just add what numbers show there. We don't care about the next number and if it's above or below 5 or 50 or whatever it happens to be. We just add the numbers in the front. All right.